11 disgusting Golden Age actors you were tricked into liking. They were once the untouchable gods of Hollywood's Golden Age. Faces plastered across bedroom walls, names that filled theaters, and personas that embodied true American values. But behind that shimmering illusion lay something far darker. Hidden in the shadows were disturbing truths the studios worked tirelessly to bury. Today, we're tearing back the velvet curtain to expose 11 beloved stars whose private lives were anything but glamorous. Their off-screen behavior ranged from predatory and abusive to outright criminal, truths so vile they would have destroyed their careers if the public had known. These weren't just minor flaws or harmless scandals. These were calculated patterns of cruelty and corruption, hidden by an industry built on lies. For every charming smile you saw on screen, there were publicists scrubbing headlines, studio fixers silencing victims, and newspapers paid off to keep their secrets buried. MGM's infamous morality clauses weren't meant to protect the public, they were designed to protect profits. Warner Brothers had police contacts who could make entire charges vanish overnight. It wasn't just about making movies, it was about manufacturing gods out of monsters. And here's the most chilling part. The greatest performances these actors ever gave weren't in front of the camera. They were the carefully crafted personas that fooled generations of moviegoers into loving them. By the end of this video, you'll see why the Golden Age's brightest stars often hid the darkest truths. And before we dive in, something lighter. I'm giving away a $10 Amazon gift card to one random subscriber who comments below. Just tell me which of these stars shocked you the most, and you're entered. Now, let's step into Hollywood's dream factory, a place that turned ordinary people into legends, while covering up sins that would have destroyed them. Here are 11 Golden Age icons whose real lives were more sinister than any villain they played on screen. Clark Gable. Clark Gable, the king of Hollywood, hiding a shadow darker than any role he ever played. For decades, audiences adored him as the ultimate leading man. His smoldering performance as Rhett Butler in Gone with the Wind sealed his throne as cinema's untouchable icon. To the world, he was strong, magnetic, irresistible, the perfect gentleman. And when he died in 1960, the press praised him as a legend without blemish, a star untainted by scandal. But beneath the polished image lay a truth carefully buried. During the filming of The Call of the Wild in 1935, Gable allegedly assaulted his co-star Loretta Young, a violent act that left her pregnant. For Young, a devout Catholic who refused abortion, the cost was immense. She vanished from the public eye, then staged an elaborate charade, adopting her own biological daughter to protect Gable's reputation. MGM not only concealed his crime but forced Young into silence, pressuring her to raise her child under a cruel lie, that she wasn't the girl's real mother. For decades, Hollywood kept it secret, while Young carried the unbearable burden. It wasn't until late in her life, after watching a program on date assault in the 1990s, that she admitted the unthinkable truth to her family: "That's what happened between me and Clark." What she once framed as a shameful seduction, she now recognized as assault. By then, it was far too late for accountability. Even after Young's daughter, Judy Lewis, published her 1994 memoir confirming Gable as her father, many historians clung to the romanticized myth of an affair, refusing to confront the reality of violence behind the glamour. The king of Hollywood's crown gleamed bright, but it was polished with silence, lies, and the suffering of a woman forced to live in the shadows of his legacy. Errol Flynn. Errol Flynn, swashbuckler or predator. To millions, he was the embodiment of the silver screen hero. With sword in hand and a devil-may-care grin, Flynn swung from chandeliers in Captain Blood and the Adventures of Robin Hood, carving his place as Hollywood's ultimate adventurer. He was charm and athleticism wrapped in a perfect physique, Warner Brothers' golden star whose smile could melt audiences in an instant. But behind that carefully polished image lurked a darkness the studio didn't want the world to see. In 1942, Flynn was accused of statutory assault by two teenage girls, Betty Hansen, 17, and Peggy Satterley, 16. The trial became a media circus, exposing disturbing allegations that painted him less as a gallant rogue and more as a man who preyed on the young. Though acquitted, the evidence suggested a troubling pattern, one the public wasn't ready to confront. Instead of ruining his career, Warner Brothers twisted scandal into legend. The studio's publicity machine recast the charges as proof of Flynn's irresistible magnetism, coining the now famous phrase, "in like Flynn," a celebration of conquest rather than a warning of predation. Behind the scenes, Jack Warner spared no expense to protect his star, deploying investigators to smear accusers, pressure witnesses, and sway jurors. Flynn's own memoir, My Wicked, Wicked Ways, published after his death, all but confirmed what the courts could not. His relentless pursuit of underage girls was not a moment of weakness but a way of life. Most shocking of all, the scandal enhanced rather than destroyed him. Errol Flynn was never punished, never shunned. He was immortalized as Hollywood's dangerous playboy, a man whose trouble with women was spun as legend while the truth was buried beneath the studio lights. Bing Crosby. Bing Crosby, America's dark father figure. For generations, his warm baritone was the sound of Christmas, of fireplaces glowing, and families gathered around radios and televisions. His iconic recording of White Christmas remains the best-selling single in history, cementing Crosby as the very voice of holiday comfort. On screen, he radiated a calm paternal charm, gentle, wise, endlessly good-humored. To the public, he was the ideal American father. But behind that flawless facade lurked a far harsher reality. His sons, Gary, Dennis, and Philip, later revealed a home filled not with laughter, but with cruelty and control. Gary Crosby's 1983 memoir Going My Own Way shattered the illusion, describing a childhood ruled by fear. He recalled weekly weigh-ins, where Bing would punish his sons with a metal-studded belt if their weight displeased him. Dennis described his father as mean and cruel, a man whose calm public smile masked a hair-trigger temper. The contrast was staggering. While millions welcomed Bing into their homes as the perfect father figure, his own children were living a nightmare of physical punishment and emotional torment. Yet Hollywood reinforced his image. Films like Going My Way and The Bells of St. Mary's, which won him an Oscar and a nomination, immortalized him as a benevolent figure of faith and family. His annual Christmas specials, carefully staged with his second wife Katharine Grant and their children, offered viewers the illusion of harmony that millions embraced as gospel truth. When Gary's memoir exposed the darkness, many fans refused to believe it, clinging to the comforting fiction they had cherished for decades. As Gary himself wrote, "We had to keep up the front of a happy family, the Crosby family, and we were all dying inside." John Wayne. John Wayne, the American hero who wasn't. For decades, Wayne towered on the silver screen as the embodiment of frontier grit, patriotic valor, and rugged masculinity. His cowboy swagger and battlefield courage defined an ideal so convincing that audiences blurred the man with his myth. To millions, the Duke wasn't just an actor, he was America itself, strong, moral, and unyielding. But behind the larger-than-life image lay a far darker truth. In his notorious 1971 Playboy interview, Wayne stripped away the illusion. When pressed on questions of race and justice, he declared without hesitation, "I believe in white supremacy until the blacks are educated to a point of responsibility," and dismissed Native Americans as selfish for wanting to keep land that had been stolen from them. These weren't careless slips of the tongue. They were deliberate, unapologetic statements that revealed views steeped in racism and contempt. The man who symbolized American virtue in film openly rejected the very principles of equality and justice that America claimed to champion. Hollywood, however, had long been complicit. Studio systems ensured Wayne almost never played villains or morally complex roles. Instead, movie after movie cast him as the righteous hero, reinforcing the illusion of his character as truth. His westerns and war films often carried undertones of propaganda, portraying Native Americans and black characters through the same prejudiced lens he defended off-screen. The myth of John Wayne was carefully protected, even as the man himself contradicted it. Today, his name still adorns places like California's John Wayne Airport, despite repeated calls for change. Efforts to confront his legacy have met fierce resistance from those clinging to the comfort of the myth rather than facing the reality of the man. John Wayne, once the symbol of American strength, now stands as a haunting reminder. Sometimes the greatest heroes on screen are the most flawed men behind the curtain. Wallace Beery. Wallace Beery, the gentle giant's violent truth. On screen, Wallace Beery was Hollywood's beloved brute with a hidden heart of gold. His Academy Award-winning role in The Champ cemented him as MGM's favorite, gentle giant, the tough guy who softened into a tender father figure, especially when paired with child actors. Audiences adored him. But behind the lights and cameras, the truth was far darker. Colleagues whispered that Beery wasn't a lovable rogue at all, but one of Hollywood's most vicious bullies. The most chilling rumor clung to a night in 1937. Outside the famed Trocadero nightclub, comedian Ted Healy, the man who founded the Three Stooges, was beaten so badly that he later died. Hollywood gossip swirled that Beery, flanked by two shady studio fixers with ties to organized crime, was at the center of the attack. Officially, Healy's death was attributed to alcohol-related illness. But many insiders believed MGM's powerful connections with the LAPD and local press buried the truth, protecting one of their most bankable stars. Beery's cruelty wasn't confined to smoky nightclubs. The child actors who played opposite his kindly screen persona carried scars of their own. Jackie Cooper, his young co-star in The Champ, later described Beery as one of the most sadistic people I've ever known, a man who stomped on his feet between takes and once even urinated on him in front of the crew. Child star Margaret O'Brien recalled that Beery would deliberately sabotage her scenes if he thought she was stealing attention. Yet, MGM kept casting him as the doting father figure, feeding audiences a fantasy while shielding the monster lurking beneath. Marlon Brando. Marlon Brando, artistic genius or calculating abuser. He redefined acting with raw, naturalistic performances in A Streetcar Named Desire and On the Waterfront, earning a reputation as the ultimate genius. Fearless, uncompromising, and obsessed with truth on screen. But behind the curtain of brilliance lies one of Hollywood's darkest scandals. In 1972's Last Tango in Paris, Brando and director Bernardo Bertolucci secretly conspired to stage the infamous butter scene without actress Maria Schneider's consent. At just 19, Schneider walked onto the set unaware of the shocking detail about to unfold. The goal was not performance, it was humiliation. "I felt a little raped," she revealed decades later, recalling the shock, the betrayal, and the silence that followed. Brando never apologized. The director later admitted he wanted her rage and shame to be real, not acted. The result? Critics praised the scene's authenticity, hailing Brando's fearless art, while Schneider was left traumatized, spiraling into depression and substance abuse. Brando received an Academy Award nomination. Schneider carried scars that never healed. Even after her death in 2011, the film continued to be celebrated, its disturbing origins brushed aside. It wasn't until Bertolucci's 2013 confession that Hollywood was forced to confront the truth. What many called art was, in fact, a violation. So, was Brando a visionary willing to risk everything for realism, or an abuser who hid cruelty behind the mask of genius? Jerry Lewis. Jerry Lewis, the clown who made the world laugh while hiding a shadow few dared to confront. For decades, he reigned as the king of American comedy, his slapstick genius and boundless energy defining an era of entertainment. Beyond the stage and silver screen, he built a second legacy as a tireless philanthropist, hosting the Muscular Dystrophy Association telethon for 44 years and raising more than $2.6 billion for charity. To the public, he was both a zany comedian and a selfless humanitarian, one of America's most cherished icons. But behind the carefully polished image lurked a darker story. Away from the spotlight, Lewis was accused of using his fame and power to harass and intimidate women. Multiple actresses and female journalists came forward with chilling accounts, crude remarks, unwanted advances, and even propositions disguised as career opportunities. Comedian Karen Sharp, his co-star in The Disorderly Orderly, 1964, recalled being called to his office for what she believed was a costume fitting, only to be groped and told Lewis needed to test their chemistry. When she resisted, she found herself ostracized on set, spoken to only when cameras rolled. Singer Lainey Kazan described another unsettling encounter, Lewis allegedly exposing himself during what was supposed to be a professional meeting. Even journalist Lillian Roxon wasn't spared. She claimed he propositioned her mid-interview, then turned hostile after rejection. Lewis's clownish on-screen persona became the perfect disguise. His reputation for unpredictable antics allowed disturbing behavior to be dismissed as just Jerry being Jerry. Meanwhile, his philanthropic work with the Muscular Dystrophy Association insulated him further, making any accusation seem like an attack not just on Lewis, but on the very cause he championed. As Lewis himself once admitted, "You know, it's hard to make people laugh for 5 minutes. I know." But perhaps what was harder was separating the man America adored from the allegations that threatened to unravel his legacy. Bob Hope. Bob Hope, America's beloved comedian, yet a nightmare for women behind the curtain. For decades, he embodied the very spirit of wholesome, patriotic entertainment. His tireless USO tours boosting the morale of soldiers overseas, his family-friendly comedy specials lighting up living rooms, his squeaky clean image earning him the Congressional Gold Medal and the adoration of presidents. To the public, He was comedy's guardian angel draped in the American flag. But beneath that carefully polished veneer lived a darker truth. Hope's private life was rife with infidelity and cruelty. Despite his 69-year marriage to Dolores, he reportedly juggled countless affairs, even keeping a secret cottage on his estate where he entertained mistresses while his wife remained in the main house. Biographer Arthur Marks claimed Hope wielded his immense power in Hollywood to pressure aspiring actresses, dangling career opportunities in exchange for sexual favors. Those who worked closely with him painted an even harsher picture. Journalist Barbara Walters, in her autobiography Audition, stripped away the myth, describing Hope as mean, cheap, nasty, a sentiment echoed by many insiders. His story became the ultimate American illusion, a man who cloaked his private misconduct in patriotism, hiding behind his role as the entertainer of troops and confidant of presidents. So deeply was his public persona fused with America's identity that to question Bob Hope was to risk being labeled unpatriotic. Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle. Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle, scandal, fame, and the rewriting of Hollywood's morality. At the height of silent cinema, Arbuckle was a giant, his brilliant slapstick routines making him second only to Charlie Chaplin in fame and fortune. By 1919, Paramount rewarded him with an unheard-of $1 million contract, cementing his place as one of Hollywood's brightest stars. But in September 1921, that glittering image shattered. Arbuckle was arrested, accused of causing the death of actress Virginia Rappe after a party in his San Francisco hotel suite. The allegations were explosive. Prosecutors claimed Rappe's fatal injuries came from a brutal assault, with Arbuckle's imposing 250-pound frame cited as the weapon itself. Though he was ultimately acquitted, so thoroughly that the jury issued him a formal apology, his career never recovered. The scandal ignited public outrage, gave birth to Hollywood's first governing body, and introduced morality clauses that would haunt stars for decades. Yet lost in the frenzy was Virginia Rappe herself, a young actress, only 30, whose painful death was eclipsed by the battle to define Arbuckle's guilt or innocence. The press reduced her to a symbol, either a saintly victim or a woman of questionable morals, erasing her humanity from her own story. In the end, Arbuckle's name became shorthand for scandal, while Rappe's life was written out of the script almost entirely. Spencer Tracy. Spencer Tracy, the moral hero's immoral reality. On screen, Spencer Tracy embodied the very essence of moral integrity. His quiet strength and unwavering decency, immortalized in Academy Award-winning performances like Captain's Courageous and Boys Town, cemented him as Hollywood's ultimate symbol of ethical leadership. To audiences, he was the man who stood tall against corruption, a priest, a judge, a voice of conscience in a turbulent world. But behind the curtain, the reality was far darker. Tracy's private life was marked by heavy drinking and troubling allegations of violence. Friends and colleagues described how alcohol could transform him from the thoughtful, disciplined man fans adored into someone unrecognizable, volatile, raging, and at times physically aggressive. Director Joseph L. Mankiewicz recalled moments when Tracy, consumed by drink, was so broken and sick that he seemed less human than the revered star the world admired. Even Katharine Hepburn, his devoted partner for decades, was not immune. According to Tracy's daughter, Susie, Hepburn once appeared at a family gathering with visible bruises, injuries that relatives quietly believed were the result of his drunken rages. Hepburn never confirmed these rumors, but her sudden withdrawals from public life, often coinciding with Tracy's binges, gave biographers plenty to question. Meanwhile, MGM carefully constructed his silver screen image, repeatedly casting him as men of unshakable virtue, roles that reinforced the illusion. To the public, he was unassailable, the very embodiment of honor and principle. Yet the man himself lived in shadows, torn between the legend he portrayed and the demons he could never conquer. Tyrone Power, the perfect leading man's hidden truth. Tyrone Power was the very definition of a Hollywood dreamboat in the 1930s and 1940s. With smoldering good looks, effortless charm, and unforgettable roles in classics like The Mark of Zorro and Blood and Sand, he became one of 20th Century Fox's brightest stars. Fan magazines breathlessly covered his every move, selling him to the public as the ultimate heterosexual heartthrob. But behind the carefully polished image lay a truth the studio system worked tirelessly to bury. Power was bisexual. According to colleagues and close friends, he carried on relationships with men throughout his career. Truths that, if exposed, would have shattered his bankability as Hollywood's great romantic lead. Unlike the darker scandals of his peers, Power's secret, wasn't a crime or moral failing, it was simply his authentic identity. Yet the very system that made him a star forced him to live a lie. Studio head Darryl F. Zanuck reportedly arranged Power's first marriage to French actress Annabella to silence rumors about his sexuality. Paparazzi dates with glamorous actresses were orchestrated for the cameras, ensuring the illusion of heterosexual romance remained intact. Friends like actor Cesar Romero later revealed that Power struggled under the crushing weight of this double life. The constant vigilance to protect his image left him drained, turning to alcohol and cigarettes to numb the stress, a burden that may have contributed to his untimely death at just 44 from a heart attack. Unlike some Golden Age stars whose scandals hid cruelty, exploitation, or abuse, Power's deception was rooted in survival. He was a victim of an industry that demanded he hide love itself. Power's story forces us to re-examine Hollywood's Golden Age illusions. Studios didn't just hide misconduct, they turned vices into marketable traits. Errol Flynn's alleged predation became roguish charm. John Wayne's racism was reframed as patriotic forthrightness. Even Marlon Brando's boundary violations were spun as artistic passion. The audience, too, played its part, choosing to cling to glossy fantasies rather than confront uncomfortable truths. The legacy of these deceptions stretches far beyond the Golden Age. The machinery of image control perfected in the 1930s still shapes modern stardom. Today's streaming platforms, behind-the-scenes specials, and heavily filtered social media feeds promise authenticity, yet remain just as calculated as MGM's old publicity playbooks. Tyrone Power's Hidden Truth reminds us that the most devastating Hollywood lies weren't always about covering up bad behavior. They were about forcing good people to erase their truest selves for the sake of the spotlight. For decades, Hollywood has mastered the art of illusion. We've seen stars like Kevin Spacey and Ellen DeGeneres cultivate spotless public images, only for shocking allegations to later tear them apart. More recent scandals involving Armie Hammer and Marilyn Manson prove one thing: the divide between a star's polished persona and their hidden reality is often a canyon. Looking back, these deceptions reveal more than just the flaws of individuals. They expose the cultural values and myths we've chosen to embrace. John Wayne's image wasn't just about selling tickets, it was about selling America itself, a version of masculinity and patriotism that still echoes in today's political discourse. That's why peeling back these layers matters. It reminds us to question not only the authenticity of our favorite celebrities, but the larger narratives their carefully crafted images are designed to sell. And with that, we've uncovered 11 beloved Golden Age icons whose wholesome facades hid disturbing, and sometimes criminal truths. From Clark Gable to John Wayne, from Bing Crosby to Jerry Lewis, these weren't just flawed men. They were figures whose behavior often stood in direct contradiction to the saintly personas Hollywood packaged for public consumption. What makes these stories chilling isn't only the misconduct itself, but the vast machinery built to hide it. Studio fixers silencing victims, publicity departments manufacturing fairy tales, and media outlets complicit in printing fiction over fact. Which of these revelations shook you the most? Were you aware of some of these rumors, or are these darker truths brand new to you? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We want to know how this changes your view of classic Hollywood. If you found value in uncovering these hidden histories, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to Golden Legacy for more deep dives into the myths, scandals, and untold truths behind the silver screen's brightest stars. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.